Okay, so today I'm so excited. I was going to say exhausted, which is the topic of the conversation, but I'm not exhausted. I'm definitely not exhausted. I'm excited because I'm with five amazing minds, five brilliant people, and we're going to discuss something that needs to be discussed, and that is Black people being exhausted, Black people being tired from being Black. And we know that this is a narrative that flies around. And for everyone who knows me, they know I love to challenge the narrative, not put people down, but we have to be able to have these discussions because if we don't, people have the false idea of how Black people are, how Black people think, and how Black people feel as a whole. And I don't think that's fair. So I have five people who I will introduce very briefly, but throughout the whole discussion, I'm sure that they're going to feed in their experiences and what they do into it as well. I'm just so eager to pick their brains. So first I've got Troy. Troy is an army veteran, a political scientist. He's also the media director for Blexit, Georgia, right?
That is
Yeah.
correct. Absolutely.
Ohbi is a poet in Hungary. He's into creative writing, critical thinking, ideation, and you also host a Thinking Out Loud room on Clubhouse.
Yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. So then I've got Jasmine. Jasmine is a Christian, an entrepreneur. I believe you're into the science of self-mastery, so mind, body, and development and things like that.
Uh-huh.
And Leah, I've been following you for a while actually, but I don't think you know. But I scrolled down my Instagram page and I saw one of posts of that I reposted of yours from October last year. So I've been following that long. So it is an absolute pleasure to be in the same digital space with you because I believe.
Oh, thank you.
Thank
you.
But you are a mom, you're a grandmother, you believe in femininity, traditional values. You advocate for maternal infant health, homeschooling as well, conservatism, all of that. And you host Conserve Tea, right? Well.
Yes.
Awesome.
Thank you.
And last but not least, we have the author and educator, Chika. She has a new book out soon. Can I tell that secret?
Yeah, go ahead.
And you also have your own podcast. And we've spoken as well before about children and in activism. So welcome all. Welcome.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
Thank you. So it's exhausting being Black. The unending exhaustion of being Black. These two things I've just said to you were the two titles of two articles that I read before coming on here to have this discussion. So what is this whole notion of Black people being exhausted, being Black?
Well, if I could share me personally, I have heard that quite a bit. And back in my previous life, I think I felt that quite a bit. It's an emotional drain and there's an emotional tie to Blackness. And one of the concepts that I have been really developing and thinking about to a great extent is what is Blackness?
I do think more now, there is definitely more a political thing about this whole thing of being Black. And I noticed that after the George Floyd incident, what started off as all Black people around the world need to stand in solidarity with this. But then what you found was when they started to see that there was actually different opinions and different thoughts within this Black collective, then this group started being dissected. So actually you are not Black, or you are not our type of Black, so it started to separate. And that's when I started to ask the question, well, what is Black then? What does this mean? Because what started off as meaning something in terms of melanin levels in your skin, your appearance, now we can't lie, we can't run from this fact anymore. Black doesn't mean It's not just in relation to our skin color. It's your culture, your ideologies. And if, you know, we've all spoken about this before. If you don't fit into that construct, then your blackness is questioned, ridiculed as well. So I do agree with that.
I want to add on to what you said. Yeah, like for example, when you're doing like marketing and stuff online now, it's like Black is a niche. You know, like what, like, you know, I'm going through like, what's your ideal customer? You know, what are their interests? Where are they located? All the different stuff. You know, now it's just like people just be like, I'm targeting Black people. You know, even Black people saying I'm targeting Black people. So it's like it's gotten to the point where it's like people are not even factoring, like thinking when they say that, like, okay, you're targeting Black people, but you know, what's the niche things, like what are the interests, what are the details about them? And that doesn't come to their mind because they figure, well, Black people just collectively think like this. So I know if I market that way, I'm gonna hit a good amount of percentage in that group and succeed. So I find it so funny because it's like when I hear people say, yeah, I'm targeting to Black people, it's just like, I'm just like, it's gotten that bad that now we don't even think about our differences and our uniqueness. You're just saying like, oh, you're all the same.
Right. Does anyone feel that Black people have a reason? Okay, we're going to get into it, you know, in terms of what, you know, racism and how racism affects, you know, individuals. But people making this statement that they are exhausted. And it's two different things, because I Googled Black people are exhausted. And like I said, these are the articles that came up. And I was thinking, well, I can understand them saying racism is the reason I'm exhausted, or we're exhausted from racism, but it was a lot of we are exhausted from being Black. So are they conflating racism with Blackness? And then which I have a second question, why do we think that, you know, racism can only be suffered by Black people, I guess? Does that make sense? Do they have a valid reason? Like, let's play the devil's advocate. Do we have a valid reason for being exhausted from this skin color that we are in?
Well, I would say, what's the gentleman's name again? Talking about going back to how Blacks are targeted. So the image of Black people in media post-slavery, post-1865 in the United States has really been controlled by the media, which was always liberal, right? And what has that image of Black people always been? And Black people have always had to live with that same image, right? And that image being Black people are lazy, that they rape white women, that they're criminals. Black people have never really had control over their own image. It's always been an image that has been given to us, not one that we necessarily developed ourselves. You can even fast forward to the rap generation. When rap first started out, it wasn't, you know, about killing people and having sex with somebody's baby's mama and, you know, all that kind of stuff. It transformed and morphed into that because the true woke message, like, I don't know if you guys know about KRS-One, but to me, I mean, the dudes are like somewhat of a genius. And even Tupac wasn't, you know, he had this like thug message, which was kind of, you know, tiring on the Black community. It was just an expression of what Black people never really got to say out in public. But at the same time, the dude, he was raised by a Black Panther, right? And Black Panthers back then, of course, they had their problems. My mom was a Black Panther herself, but they were more conscious of what they were saying back then, if that makes any kind of sense. So where does this tiredness come from? It really, if you ask me, it comes from the media, the image that's been portrayed for a few centuries now. Me personally, I'm tired of it because it's being used against us. I'm not tired of being Black. I'm tired of being used, if that makes sense.
And it's interesting because you mentioned that your mom was a Black Panther. So talking about parents a bit, what kind of things did you hear sort of growing up, if you heard? And in that sense as well, do you think that parents have a part to play in how, I would say their children, but how their children think, who then become adults and who then have this filter in life? What do you think about that in terms of parents versus authentic experiences that people have? Do you think that there's a role that parents have in terms of what they say to their children?
Yeah, I mean, I have to absolutely say yes. So my father, he's a black victocrat, right? So everything that happened in his life is because of the white man. However, my grandmother, his mother, she's completely different. So my grandmother, she grew up on a plantation. Grew up on a plantation, became sharecropper, all that kind of stuff. But the experiences that my dad talks about versus what my grandmother talks about are like completely different things. She grew up in the country. My dad grew up in the country, but moved to like the city. And the city is where you had more racial tension. In the country, you didn't really have that so much. People kind of lived on their own. So my dad's experience, like he tried to shape how I saw things. But my grandmother, like you talk to her now, so what about, Jim Crow? She didn't really affect her. Yeah. And I think if people were really, because there are a lot of interviews on YouTube, if you go search for them, people talking about their experiences back in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. They're there. Not everybody's talking about, oh, the white man was out to get me. That's not true. We just hyper sensationalize these things in the media because Black people tend to be emotional. And how do you sell things to Black people? Well, one way is through emotions. So
I agree. And I want to push back on that. And I want, if anyone else has some thoughts on it. There are many things I hate when it comes to this whole talk about racism and race relations. And I think my top 3 is this notion that that Black people never know what we're doing. So I 100% agree that the media has a part to play. But can we blame the media? If that makes sense? For example, we hear such things. Yeah, sorry. Yes, for example.
No, go ahead. I'm listening.
Okay. For example, we hear such things like, drugs are in our communities because what the white man puts them there, right? But then you think, well, no one is forcing you to take the drugs. On the same token, okay, these stereotypes exist because the media portrays us that way, but no one's forcing you also to play into those stereotypes, right? So a lot of the situations that has happened that has apparently triggered this undercurrent feeling of tiredness in Black people are things where, for example, it's a criminal involved or someone had a part to play in their demise or in whatever that happened to them. And yet you have normal Black citizens in good jobs who cannot really relate to that person apart from their skin color. They wouldn't have they don't make the same choices. They don't go to the same places. And yet they feel the same tiredness or they feel some kind of tiredness. I read an article when it came out, spoke about this before, about students from Oxford University, Black students apparently being excused from taking exams if they wish to because of what happened in America with George Floyd. And I'm thinking to myself, so here you are in one of the best universities in the world. And yet, because of something that happened to a criminal, that's the long and short of it. You are willing, someone who didn't make good decisions, and here you are who has made good decisions, and you're somewhat jeopardizing that because you feel this trauma. Fast forward 5, 6, 7 years to the future when you're meeting your first job or in your first real battle in a workplace, and you can't handle it because you've not built up that same level of resilience. If that, I know I'm rambling, but if that makes sense, why are we taking on this pain from people? So yes, we can say it's the media, but is it only the media? Is it only really external forces that's causing us to feel, think, and be the ways that we are sometimes?
Is that a question for me?
I guess so too.
Because I agree with you. I'm not saying that the complete onus is on the media. Is it a factor? Is it a variable? Absolutely, it is. But when you talk about the path of least resistance, Where do we get our information from? Mostly it's the media. Where do we see our image? It's the media. So I'm saying it plays a major role, but it's not the it's not the silver bullet answer to how we see ourselves. But I'll let somebody else pick up on that.
So for me, I think as human beings, not just as Black people, but as human beings, we tend to, if we see that something is going to benefit us, we have a tendency to want to milk whatever we can from it. And right now the narrative is Black people are suffering, Black lives matter. So if you're Black, just milk whatever you can from that, whether it's a job, whether it's posturing your business as Black owned, whether it's, being tired. And it's all about getting as much white guilt or I guess privileged guilt as you can. And I'm not saying all of us do this because I certainly don't, but it's all about, this is a kind of way, in my opinion, for certain people to kind of get their revenge on all of the atrocities that happened before. And it's kind of playing into the whole oppression Olympics. I didn't want to bring that up, but it's playing into that. And, I always like to say, stop subscribing to the roles that society likes to put on people. Right now we know what the role is that they want us to play, and we don't have to play into that. We don't have to buy into that. You don't have to have trauma. Like, you don't have to have something that you're going through. Like, you're still just as important. You're still just as relevant as everyone else. Yes. Without any of those comorbidities of emotional distress.
Exactly.
But I think also that we as humans, for some reason, we take more value, or we value more that story, that rags to riches story generally. Negative news is more interesting to us than positive news. If I ask you to list 10 negative things about yourself, you do it off the back. If I ask you to list 10 positive things about yourself, you will struggle, not because you don't necessarily know it as well, but it's that false humility, and also insecurity plays into that as well. Negativity sells, negativity attracts us. So I think nowadays, with the rise of social media, that's obviously multiplied by X amount. Everyone wants a story. And with Black people, for some reason, we've picked Blackness to be some kind of to be a story of hardship and struggle. This article I read said we struggle every day. I'm not making this up. Every day, every Black person has to do mental calculus on how they will approach their day. So, number one, what is this obsession with speak? I just don't. It takes me a long time to get ready and leave my house, granted. But not because I'm doing a mental calculation of, I'm Black. So at work, how am I going to be? Quiet or loud? I don't want to be an angry. I don't do that. So why do some people feel the need that they feel the need to do that themselves? Who here has to do, and be honest, okay, or think of a time if you've ever felt that you had to do mental calculations to leave your house because you are Black and because of racism? If so, why, when, or why not if you haven't? Yeah.
So I think you picked the wrong set of Black people to answer this question.
Actually, went through that phase. So, for example, when I really started learning more about this whole Black stuff and what goes on, generally I used to just carry myself like I didn't care how I carried myself. So this regular, I would say New York style or fashion, right? Like this is like in high school, everybody kind of dressed a certain way, like sweats, sneakers, whatever brand name clothes and stuff like that. So when I started to acknowledge that, even though I know I'm not a certain type of way, there's a certain stereotype of dressing this way, I probably should have a little more what's what I'm looking for? Intention with dressing, so that when someone sees me, they don't pull me into that box of first impression. So that's something I went through, because I was like, I don't care if people want to think I'm this way or not, that's on them. But I started to realize, like, well, there's certain stereotypes of just, not even a white man seeing a black person, it's another black person seeing a black person, and they think they're that way. So I said, okay, I got to dress, a little bit more professionally, articulate myself with, a bit more proper English instead of like the slangs. So like up to now, ever since high school, I don't like whatever New York slang that they have, I've not been keeping up. Like the kids will say it around me now, and I'm just looking like, that's a new word. So just little things like that I factored into when going into like the professional world, that, it does matter if I don't want to be seen as these category of, as a black person, just based on the collective stereotype that the media and stuff has.
It's so funny. It just made me remember that I've done mental calculus as well to leave the house, but it's not because I'm black in that sense. It was because I wasn't black enough, according to some of my friends, right? So there was a period in my life where I was very confused, because I'm from Nigeria, as many of you know, and in Nigeria we don't have identity politics in terms of race, because we are all black. It won't work. So when I came here and I was hearing all of this talk, right? And it was like, and I was very well spoken. I did very well at school. Ironically, I wasn't very well behaved, but when it came to books, when it came to listening to what that teacher was saying, that was Ada, right? That was me. And also I had an interest in culture. I've always had an interest in culture. And for some reason, I don't know how it is in the US, it's changed now, but when I'm talking good 15, 16 years ago, it wasn't very cool for a black person to be interested in culture, to want to have different kinds of friends, Chinese, South Asian, white friends. It wasn't very cool. I had to do the black thing. I like some different kinds of music. I don't just like the stereotypical R&B and pop. I enjoyed soft rock, punk. I did classical, and it wasn't cool. So I started to have the mental calculus of, how can I be not to have those comments of, you are weird for a black girl, you are quiet for a black girl, because I'm not a quiet person, but I choose my words. And my friends obviously thought that wasn't a black enough thing, and when they would be around me, it's like, I've actually noticed you're quite quiet for a black girl, And it was like, okay, so how can I be loud? How can I be this and that and the other? So that was the kind of mental calculus I did. So
I want to add to that. So the mental calculus I gave was like now when I got out of high school, but in school, being that I came from Jamaica and came here, I first went to a predominantly white school in Brooklyn. Then I always tell people I didn't find out I was black until I moved to Jamaica, Queens, where that's where like it was a predominantly black neighborhood. And back in Brooklyn, like the things that was focused on was like education, like, we'd have like tests, who's gonna pass, who could do 100 multiplication in 1 minute, who can basically be at the top in terms of academics, and just, experiencing like different various positive experiences. When I came here, all the education things went out the window. It was all about, who has the clothes, who has the shoes, who has the money, trying to imitate various rappers and things of that nature. So I got to a point where I started having an identity crisis, because I'm like, I don't care about any of those things, but apparently those things made me a nerd and got me bullied. Then I went through this next phase of where, because I'm Jamaican, I'm being told I'm not Jamaican enough because I'm not doing like what, the general media, what Jamaica shows, like, the music and things of that nature. So those were the years where I was like, I was so lost in who I was, because it's like, am I black? Am I Jamaican? I got to a point where I decided that I hated all black people, because I was just like, nothing's about education, nothing's about learning, everything's about money. I'm like, why do black people think this way? When I got older, I realized it's the mindset of that socioeconomic community. And I was like, okay, it's not that I don't like Black people. I just didn't like this environment and how the paradigm was. And this paradigm, especially collectively in America, based on the media, it's subconsciously conditioned primarily out of African Americans to think a certain way. So even when they're saying they're woke, they're not as woke as they think they are, because all these things that, like, George Floyd, what goes on BLM, all of that, it's all emotional triggers. And it's at a point now where literally, if you were somebody evil, like if I was an evil white guy, right, and I wanted to cause some sort of like spark within the Black consciousness, just do something that comes off racist, and you got everybody moving. So now for me, it's just like, sometimes like I'm like, when I see certain things happening, like another white person did this or whatever, that I'm just like, I don't know if it's really genuinely happening. I'm just like, it's a setup, because it always happens, and then people go crazy, and then this happened and that happened. So in terms of the choosing the identity, I find that maybe those of us who had a little bit more self-awareness had that struggle, while those who just subconsciously got locked in, they're not aware of it at all, so they think it's the norm. Yeah, unmute yourself.
So this conversation that we're kind of headed into kind of reminds me of, can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, it kind of reminds me of code switching. I actually read, well, I didn't read an article because I had a paywall, but I got like some chunks of it. And it was basically saying how Black people are being, it's like an emotional toll on Black people having to change their demeanor, change their vernacular when they're in the workspace or not around other Black people. And Troy just made me think of like, oh, I mean, okay, so obviously everyone has to do that, including the very people that, Black people feel like they have to do it with. White people also have to do it as well. But you also made me think about, because I'm also Nigerian, and I kind of have to code switch around other Nigerians sometimes. Like, yes, I have this accent right now, but I also have to do a very Igbo accent sometimes when I'm around them. But my point being, we're not the, back to the whole Black people being tired thing. We're not the only ones that have to kind of step out of our comfort zone or our, the way we normally act in order to acclimate or adjust to our environments. We have to make adjustments in the different environments that we find ourselves. And to me personally, I don't think Black people are more tired than, any other race. I just don't think that. I mean, especially since we're not going through any of the, again, atrocities that, I always find it weird to say my ancestors because they're not, but, those ancestors had to go through in America. Like none of them are going through any of those things. I mean, we're light years from what they had to go through. So I personally don't subscribe to Black people being more tired or Black people. I think everyone has heard of post-traumatic slave syndrome. I don't know how accurate that is. I know that there are studies about them. I don't know if that's an actual thing. If you can, I do think that you can pass down some trauma, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, it does. Point being, I do think that everyone has to make themselves a little uncomfortable when they're in certain spaces around certain people, because you don't want to, come off as incompetent or, I don't know, a straight up hooligan when you're around or in these spaces, or just unprofessional. You don't want to do that. So it just made me think of that. So I wanted to bring up that point.
Well, really, really quickly, I wanted to share, because I love the fact that we have people from different backgrounds. But I tend to think that in the States, some of the subconscious groupthink is coming from roots in the 70s. And so I have to say, seeing as I'm 49, a lot of what I thought about race relations came from Roots. It was a yearly event. Like everybody sat down and everybody got their popcorn so that they could be traumatized for 7 days straight. Whoa. And it was an event, but that is social and subconscious trauma. Now, at the time when I started watching it, we were living in Nebraska, and I was before 10 years old. I'm sorry, living in Baltimore, Chocolate City. So I did not have a lot of interactions with white people, but I did get a cross burned in my yard. And this was a upper middle class neighborhood still, but that was the early 80s. Shortly thereafter, we moved to Nebraska, where there was all white people. And I felt that. That was the first time that I felt, because they were uncomfortable with me. I was the only Black child in the class. But that level of discomfort, had someone been able to tell me, well, that's just, it's life. They weren't used to a Black person in their class. I was not used to a whole bunch of white people. So it is what it is. But because I had been conditioned via Roots, I took it as racism. Now I want to fast forward. I never learned about race relations in my home. My mother was an extreme corporate level, PhD from Wharton business, all of that. She was not about that life. It's because she had experience having grown up in a sharecropper's home with no electricity and 12 children in the home. She saw education as her way out. The rest of her family members said, oh, you're trying to be white. You're trying to blah, blah, blah. And so she distanced herself from them for several decades. But fast forward, so I never learned about it, but then I got to college, and all of a sudden it was Malcolm X. It was the early 90s. It was, Black studies. And I was like, well, I didn't learn it at home. So I went the complete opposite. I was pro-Black, everything, blah, blah, blah. And that's when I got indoctrinated again. But what's interesting that I want to share with you all is that then I decided to take myself to West Africa.
Wow.
And my son's father is Ivorian.
Oh, okay.
So he had gone prior to, I met him in Texas, but as soon as I graduated from UT Austin, I said, we're going. So I went to join him there. And when I tell you the cultural dysfunction that I went through, which I wish most Black Americans would, can you imagine the way my brain exploded when they told me I was not Black? They told me I was American. And I love the Ivorians. But when I tell you the meltdown, because all of my training in terms of college, communism mess, and then the whole Roots story, and I'm going back to my people, and I'm repatriating, and I lived there for 4 years, and my son was born there. But for them to tell me I wasn't Black, that I was American, like, how dare you? Because I've built up this whole trauma, and I'm exhausted, and I'm repatriating, and screw everybody, like US is this, that. And now you tell me I'm not Black? I'm not African? Like, how dare you? But I had to learn to realize that they're not raised on this issue of Blackness, because everybody there is Black. So what? And so I think to myself, when I see people ranting and raving and in the streets looting, I wish you would take your tail to Africa, any African nation, and let them school you on that. It's not about that. It's a whole different reality, which is why I say this exhaustion is a manufactured exhaustion. This planning yourself to get yourself mentally ready to go out to work, to go to school, to do all of this stuff. It is a fabricated reality that is not real, which is why Nigerians and Africans can come to America and don't experience racism. They're still buying homes within 5 years. They are, making money, living their life. West Indians. They're not concerned with Blackness, but we supposedly all look the same. So what's the problem?
Exactly.
Can I say something now? Based on what you said? Based on what you said about, the Americans, like, okay, I haven't been to America before. I haven't been to UK, but I just went straight up from Nigeria to Hungary for studies. And somehow, the idea that Black Americans are not Blacks, like personally, should I say we, I don't know how I'm going to put it, but anyway, now most Nigerians don't really despise Black Americans because we feel they are too, how would I put it, too sensitive. Growing up from where we come from is not easy. You have to hustle, and we're like looking up there, in America, and like, you guys, like, we are wishing to go there, and you guys are like complaining and shouting, like, geez, that's why whenever people from West Africa go over there, they don't even care about what you're saying. They just hustle, and yeah, and concerning about and concerning about the media stuff, about the whole blackness stuff, like, okay, when I came to Hungary, it was really it was really annoying the kind of questions people asked me. It was they asked me, they're like, is there water? I'm like, geez. They asked me weird questions, you know. And what I realized was that, the only information source they get was just from the media. So it was based on that they get their own, ideology and all that. Yeah. So well, that's what I have to say concerning
And
this part.
I think, oh, sorry.
No, continue, please.
No, did you finish?
Yeah, continue.
I think that's everything is tied in. So it's not like these things don't happen. It's not like microaggressions don't happen, which I will come to next. But one thing Leah said, the word she used was concerned. When they come over to the US, to the UK, and Africans, Caribbeans, immigrants, Black immigrants, when they come over, they are not concerned with that, which means that they are concerned and focusing on other things. I'm sorry, exactly. But where you focus on is where your energy is going to go into, right? So even if, okay, all these things exist, the white man is against you and all these things, you focusing on that, it's not going to help you anyway. But I feel Black Americans and also Black Britons, they are obsessed with proving it right. They're obsessed with proving the narrative right. You see, I didn't get this job because of racism, not because of any other factor. It's only I'm part of the statistic of my fellow Black people who aren't getting the jobs. And I've never in my whole life, as God is my witness, I've never got rejected for a job, for a promotion, and attributed that to my skin color. Unless it was obvious that it was because of my skin color. And for that to be obvious, I need to verify it. But there's no verification with many of these things. It's just rejection, racism, rejection, Black racism, right? And it's mind-boggling that they just have this limited way of living their lives, right?
Yeah. I think they haven't. I think if it's because they haven't really experienced pain or hardship, I would say, because we all know that, like, people like some of the Nigerians, like, we all know, I'm talking based on experience though, we all know that Nigeria is a very good country, like rich, but it's quite corrupt, and to climb up the ladder is not easy. So we have learned how to, should I say, in a way, be disciplined with pain. And we kind of like try to, should I say, no matter what, just, okay, we're gonna make it. And so I feel that the Black Americans, like, they, should I call it an ideological pain? I don't know how I'm going to put it. It's more like, someone says something and you just decided to accept as a reality. So once it's in your mindset, anything you're saying is like, okay, it's all about racism. And here, I have some Black friends also, and they, we made conversations about, if I've ever experienced, like, personally, I would say I've not really experienced, but they said they have experience. I'm like, wow, okay. Because here in Hungary, most of my friends that are Hungarians say, Hungarians are quite, racist, but I haven't met one-on-one. Of course, there's no how there's going to be a country that ain't racist. In every country, there's a part that, that are racist, but, the majority and the minority and all that. So, and sometimes they come to me, like those, like white should I say, let me say white people. Anyway, those white Hungarians, they come to me and say, hey, BLM. I'm like, what the fuck are you telling me? When they say some kind of things, I'm like, okay, because it's more like whenever they see me, they see someone that is oppressed, that is suffering. That is exhausting. That is really exhausting, and it's something. And I try to, like, as much as I can, educate them, but at the same time, they will try to be really sympathetic. I personally, I don't like being a victim in any sort. Treat me as you're going to treat any other human being.
Yeah.
That's what I have to say for this, though.
I was going to say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
All right. I wanted to add just like the four points that I jotted down. So when you talk about the focus of like what they focus on, as you share, there's struggles here in like actually like in America. There's struggles everywhere. That's relative. However, immigrant struggle versus a lot of American struggle is that Black people are. It's not complete poverty where it's like, they're lacking their basic needs. You know what I'm saying? So even right now, I'm around a lot of guys, they're doing a whole bunch of BS. And I'm like, hey, let's do something legit. Let's do something serious. And they're like trying to chase the fast life and all these different stereotypes. But then it's just like, you know why you're not taking nothing serious? You're comfortable. You're comfortable. You can eat, drink, go to, buy food, so your basic needs aren't so deprived that you literally, are like struggling like people that are immigrants that like, to get their basic needs is a lot harder. So that's why they don't take it serious, or they think that, they'll be like, yeah, I'm struggling. And just like, dude, if you can sleep, you're sleeping in your bed, you're drinking water, you forget those things, you're not struggling like you think you really are. So when immigrants come here and they get those things, it's like, we want to keep those. Like I have a lot of African neighbors and even islanders, and they still, the way they process stuff that has kept them good here, they're in a place of survival mode. Even now when they've made it, they're making their $30 an hour, like they talk to me, they give me advice. I'm like, yo, like that's coming from a place of survival mode. I'm like, when do you get out of survival mode? You got your house, you're comfortable, Number two, the focus. Yes, the media makes Black people here focus on racism. And I went through that mindset phase where like at some point I started attributing racism to why nothing was working out for me. And I had to like snap out of it. I'm just like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy. Like I was thinking everything at some point was because of racism. But I also went through a phase of where, as he's sharing, when your mindset is not focusing on racism, maybe I've had something racist done to me and I didn't even know because I'm not actually observing those things. And the last thing, it goes back to when I was in college and I was reading the books about mindset, and like, I can become successful. There's other Black people who are successful. And I remember I went to my college advisor and I was like, yo, I'm like, read about all these successful Black people and stuff like that. Then he came like, but the average Black man doesn't graduate college, And then he literally said to me, he's just like, Jaman, that's all great, but you ought to understand you're Black. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, you're supposed to be a psychologist. And you're literally telling me that because I'm Black, after factoring that I'm not gonna like make it or something like that. I'm like, and that's when I realized even these psychologists is subconsciously in their own paradigm. And lastly, that's when I got like an inspiration from like God, where it's just like, you got to focus on the light, not the darkness. So you could sit down here, talk about all the negative things, like it's real, it's happening, it's all things to factor. But some people, they get so obsessed with it that now you're so obsessed with it that you don't even see any opportunity or all the opportunities that are coming by. So like even with all the internet, Shopify, like e-commerce, all these different things are literally like in our face. And everyone's so caught up with what's going on race-wise that all these stuff are just passing them by. And now what's happening, the younger generation are saying like, wait a minute, I could buy shares, I could buy stocks, I could get online, I can do all these different stuff. So now that's why we're not really listening to a lot of the older people, because some of them are still stuck in like, oh, it's your color. And some of us are like, yo, like I just made $10,000 online. I don't know about the skin color thing. So there's a disconnect, but it's all about the focus. And the reason why we still having this whole Black thing is because there's still a lot more older people who are pushing that on the narrative. They're pushing it on their kids. Like even this whole like pandemic thing is just like, there's still a lot of older people who still think the TV is the absolute form of information. So I'll go talk with my 70-year-old neighbor, this and that. I'm like, yeah, but that's not what the internet's saying. Oh, the internet's not credible. I'm like, so that's why a lot of this exhaustion is coming, because the older people are trying to push it on us, the younger generation, and we're just like, can we get over it now? Because it's not as bad. And then some of the younger kids, they do take it on, and then they manifest those negative things that and then they validate like, oh, this stuff is real, and just like you got stuck in a paradigm. We can't help you break out of it.
If I may, can I pick up on that?
Mm-hmm.
So I've been listening a lot more these last 30 minutes, but the recurring theme that I'm hearing is information, right? And in epistemology is like the study of knowledge, right? So I told you guys that I'm in Augusta, Georgia. You don't know that. You only know it because I told that to you, right? So throughout history, the last 150 years or whatever, we've been told like a certain negative narrative of information. And that's what we continue to absorb. In 1865, 1870, 1900, access to information was not that prevalent. But as technology has, of course, grown over the last 100 years, more information is now available. More information being negative that we're attracted to because, the wow factor, we just continue to pick up on more of it and we absorb more of it. So of course, over time, that's going to make you more tired. The more you see negative images about yourself, the more you hear a negative history about yourself, your country, it all falls back to the information that we absorb.
I think in terms of negative wording, I want to explore that and negative language. And the article I referenced earlier called The Unending Exhaustion of Being Black. I just want to read some lines and I want you to just tell me what you think about this, because these are the real lines from this article. So they wrote, having a day off from being Black. There's no having a day off from being Black. Skin color isn't returnable. It is what it is for a lifetime. And there was something else that she was talking about after George Floyd. Many white people were sending her DMs, because they have the choice not to deal with race on a daily basis. But this person wrote, such choices are not an option for those in Black bodies.
I can tell you this, growing up in a Black community,
I can't.
you in a Black community, you have this infight with the light skins and the dark skins. So like, I don't know, where does it stop? That would be my question. Where does it stop when it's all community?
Honestly, the issue is that Blackness is a religion.
Yep.
Set everything else aside, Blackness is a religion. So if what you think about the majority of your time is what you are praying to, it's what you're thinking to, it's what you're expecting, it's what you're attracting to yourself. So of course it's exhausting. And then it just nurses that narcissism within that, oh, the white people that I'm actually secretly worshiping, because I'm constantly looking to them for validation and to make me feel better about my having adopted this made up Blackness that doesn't really describe who I am, then that, of course, is my religion, and I'm exhausted from my religion. And people don't want to admit that. That's why the Black churches have fallen astray in the States. That's why we have now here in Atlanta a Black principal who has instituted segregation and put Black children separate from white children. And they've gone backwards. So what it is that you most desire, which is to validate the story of your Blackness, which you are emotionally addicted to, you will do anything to validate that, including going back into chains if you have to, so that you can tell people, this is how much you people are so racist towards us. Do you see my change? So now we've taken it back to segregation. 1960s. And before you know it, because it's made people so crazy in their blackness, they will eventually request slavery in order to prove their point. See, my favorite people in the world, you white people, you are racist, and you guys need to accept and validate us and make us better. And that's what it's all about. So all this bluffery and puffed up chest and my blackness and black girl magic and all this stuff that has nothing to do with who they really are as human beings. If you were to take blackness away from these people who are out here on social media carrying on, who would they really be? It would be nobody, because they have not ever built up who they truly are as a child of God. What they have done is built up this Black narrative and this Black persona and this Black character, which is not them, which includes, like Troy said, the whole light-skinned Black. I can't believe I just saw the other day somebody talking about, it was a baby posted, and oh, she's got good hair. It's 2021 and you are on the streets protesting BLM, but because she had a little bit curly hair, you said good hair, and it's 2021 and you're a pro BLMer. So what does that say about you? That it's all fake, it's all a persona, and it's not real.
Powerful.
Can I add something?
Please, yes.
So I was watching Real Housewives of New York. I don't know if anyone else watches that. It's kind of my guilty pleasure. But anyway.
What?
Real Housewives of New York on Bravo. You're in Hungary, probably, I don't know. But they decided to add a Black woman to the cast this season. And I'm not sure if she was aware that she was literally like a racial prop the whole season. Like, I'm pretty sure their ratings tanked because all she did was feel the need to teach them about Blackness. Mind you, to be on some of these shows, you have to be, be in a certain tax bracket, wealthy, have means. And she's a lawyer, very successful, and had the audacity to fix her mouth to be like, I'm not as privileged as you, my white counterpart. And one of the other white women on the show was like, how? I don't see it. You're so successful. Like, what are you talking about? You don't wake up like me. You don't have to wake up like I do. You don't have to think about being Black. You don't have to carry that weight. I'm like, she's literally telling you that you don't have this weight that you're speaking of. And that's the problem. You have people like LeBron, Oprah, Obama, these people that are telling you how to feel, how to navigate the world, when all you have to do is look around you, right? Like, just look. And I think that's what the problem, like, people are not looking at their neighbors. People are not, like, I live in a predominantly Black area where some would say that we're probably one of the wealthiest areas for Black people. And I'm looking at people around me and I'm like, yeah, we're making it. We have, thankfully, thank God, because I don't claim self-made. I don't do that. I owe everything I have to God. But I'm not struggling, right? And a lot of Black people are not struggling. And they keep trying to force this message of like, you're struggling, you're never going to be anything. Ada, you mentioned how you were, you excelled at school and all these things. Some Black people would have the nerve to say that you are the exception.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Like, it's exceptionalism. And I'm like, how is it? I don't think I'm an exception. I don't think I'm exceptional. I feel like I'm pretty average. I feel like I'm like the majority of people in America that, and don't get me wrong. And I feel like I used to have that mindset of like, oh, maybe I'm not getting this because I'm Black or because I'm a woman. I have a double negative on my person because I'm a woman, because I'm Black. I don't think like that anymore. Like, I realized I had to change that, like we've all been saying here, that mindset. And I wish people would stop it's like putting a curse on yourself. It's like you want this cloud, this dark cloud over your life, over our entire existence as Black people, when, newsflash, all of us are going through the same things. It may not look the same way, but I do think media is very influential in the way we think. Stop watching. Look, I watch it, but I don't let it influence me. Just don't let it influence you. Like, it's not that deep. You live your life, do what you got to do to excel. If you got to work a little harder, that's fine. Like, but stop thinking that the world is out. There's this boogeyman that's out to get you. There's this boogeyman that's out to keep you in a certain at a certain level or at a certain place. I mean, it's not. It's. I don't think that it's like that. It shouldn't be like that if it is. But I'm so tired of this narrative of we're supposed to be we're suffering more than everyone, or we're tired, more tired than everyone. I don't think it's the case. All of us are tired. All of us can experience being exhausted. That's just how the world works, unfortunately, you know? And it brings, it kind of, I don't know. I hope I can share this, but I kind of went on our little rant following Simone Biles's actions at the Olympics. Now I don't give a damn what she decided to do with herself, even though, you know, she's a leader of her team and representing the country. But, you know, she decided to do what was best for her and bow out for a couple of events. And, you know, a lot of people had something to say. And again, her decision to bow out of the competition, not knocking her for that, I don't really care. But a lot of people had something to say about it, especially on Twitter. I saw a lot of things on Instagram as well. And, you know, you said something earlier, Ada, about pushing back on this certain narrative about tiredness and Black people. So I saw that a lot of these comments were getting retweeted. A lot of them were getting liked, shared. And I was like, you know what? I cannot, I cannot keep, well, obviously not by myself. I mean, I can't do anything by myself, but someone has to speak against this, because they're going to keep thinking that every person, every Black woman, every Black person feels this way. So I decided to respond. And just to reference the tweet, I won't say who it was, but she said, Black women are tired. Keisha Bottoms told you we're tired. Naomi Osaka told you we're tired. Now Simone Biles is telling y'all we're tired. People want to take on the world for their benefit while actively tearing us down. We're magic, but we ain't superhuman. I'm tired too. So I responded, tired of what exactly? Most of us choose the lives we live, and we are aware that there is some struggle that comes with that. What is this imaginary burden that we're supposed to be tired of? And I went on and on, but the thing that really grinds my gears is this notion of Black girl magic. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I thought it was corny when it first started, but I wasn't like, I didn't really care either way, you know. But then I over the years I started realizing, like, wait, I've never heard of like white girl magic, Asian girl magic, Hispanic girl magic. I've never heard of this thing, this magical thing that we as Black women or Black people, whatever, apparently need. And I think that this magic per se has given us like this false sense of entitlement, like we're not supposed to go through the things that everyone else is going through. So I really wanted to push back on that narrative. And, you know, obviously I got some hate from that. But, you know, I really need you know, Black women especially, to like come down back to earth and like, let's put things into the perspectives that they belong. Like, we're not special. We're not, Black people are not special. Like literally, if you find whatever is ailing us as a community, you can find that same ailment in a white community, in an Asian community, and just because we don't hear about it doesn't mean that it's not happening in those communities. We just don't hear about it because the media chooses what to put in front of us. And because some of you said earlier, Troy, you know, they know that we're emotional. They know that this is what will, you know, have us getting all up in arms and all of our panties in a bunch. They know that this is what will get a reaction out of us. All of this, you know, putting all of that suffering, all of that trauma porn in our face. And it's up to us really to just, again, push back against that. Like, I don't want to see all of that. Till today, I have not seen that whatever 9 or so minute video of George Floyd dying. I'm not going to watch it. For what? Like, I hear enough about it. Why to watch it? I mean, why do we put ourselves through that. But my point being, I don't think, again, I've said this before, and I'm gonna keep reiterating it because it needs to be kept, it needs to keep being said. We're not more tired than everyone. You know, let's put that narrative aside. Matter of fact, just throw it in the trash. We're all tired. Like, we all can get tired. White people are also tired. Newsflash. Asian are also tired. Like, everybody is tired. I mean, we've been through a lot during this pandemic, right? And not just the pandemic, just everybody and human beings go through things. And that is what makes us all similar, very similar, that we all suffer. We all, experience joy. And for some reason, we've lost that part of the plot. Like, we all go through these range of emotions. Like, it's not just Black people that are going through these things. And I'm so I'm tired of hearing that constant rhetoric. And we need to, even though it's a small group of us, I don't even think it's that small. I think we're part of the silent majority that needs to speak up more about us, not being tired, or us just living normal lives and, doing what we got to do to be successful, or whatever success looks like for us. And that's all I'll say on that.
Yeah, I think definitely we need to stop competing as to who has it more, who has it harder.
Yeah.
Exactly. For me, it's a boring way to live life. I don't know if you've seen that movie Wonder with Julia Roberts, and she has a disabled son. No, he's not disabled, but his face is disfigured. So he's I don't know what happened. I can't remember it. But anyway, he has a disability, not mentally, but sort of physically. And he goes through life a victim based on how people see him and treat him. And to cut a long story short, there's one scene I will never forget. And he came in, ranting and raving. He had a sister, an older sister, and her life basically revolved around him as well, right? So going to all the hospital appointments and this and that and the other. So he had a tough life. And he came in one day just basically ranting and raving, and this is what I went through. This is what they called me, this. And she was like, look, have you asked about me? Have you asked about how my day is? And then he's like, well, you don't know you don't have it hard like I do and all this. And she's like, well, you don't know what I go through as well. And granted, you can say his is worse, whatever, but how does that benefit him by thinking that, how does that make him grow by deciding within himself, I have it worse than her? What does that actually do but bring about pity parties and sympathy? And it's like, why do people want that? Why do you feel that there's some kind of reward that we seem to give those, whether reward in terms of special passes or attention? There seems to be this need to want to be the one that is struggling the most. I mean,
can I share something really quickly based on what you're saying? And I didn't mean to cut you off, but one of the things that I remember when I was in college, and I was in this women's studies class, and it was horrible, by the way, now that I think back to it, but I left class mad every day. But one of the things that when I was studying pro-blackness back in the early 90s and whatnot, the thing that a lot of Black people today, which they are taking that education on into today, is that they, whether it's Dr. Valentine, I mean, just old school pro-Black people.
Echoing.
I'm sorry, I'll be still. So what they're showing and what they're teaching Black people is that even the poorest white person from the Appalachian Mountains with sticks and I don't know what, but their white skin gives them privilege. So even if they're the poorest, they don't care about your story, what you're talking about. He could be in a wheelchair with one eye and no teeth, but as long as he's white, he has the privilege because he was born with white skin. And because of that, they don't want to hear about oh, well, I have it tough too. And oh, I have a hard life too. Because in that whole philosophy that they've been raising, quote unquote, Black, at least Black Americans on for at least 40 years now, if not 50, is that it's about the color of the skin. And as long as you're Black, that's why don't give a penny or a nickel or whatever to a white homeless, because if you're white in America, you're not supposed to be, you have white privilege. So why are you homeless? Like, go shave and do something and then go get a job because you're white. You're not like us, that even if we shave, even if we take our beard off, even if we do whatever, just by us showing up with Black skin, we are traumatized before we even get in the door. And so that's what I think you're going to hear when you post this, is that there's still going to be the arguments that I don't care if you got 2 toes and I don't know what, as long as you've got white skin, you can clean yourself up in America and go out there and become a CEO in 2 days. The Black people can't do that. And if you can't fix that story and that narrative, whatever we're talking about today is not going to matter, because that's been the education within 40 years, including Tariq Nasheed and all of his nonsense and everything else that's going on right now is based on that. So we really have to break down that education, that sorry victimology that is telling Black people that you cannot do anything in this world based solely on the color of your skin, because nothing else matters, and the poorest white guy can leap and get ahead of you in leaps and bounds only because he's white.
We hope you're enjoying the conversation so far. The rest of the conversation can be accessed by becoming a patron. Different Voice is here to ask the tough questions and to have the difficult conversations. She's here to bring balance, nuance, and a change of perspective to sensitive matters such as individualism, collective identity, racial relations, and so on. So if you want to be a part of this growing work, if you want to contribute or support, then we want to encourage you to become a patron. Head over to patreon.com/differentvoicex to have access to cool benefits and even watch this conversation in full. Yes, you'll get exclusive access to conversations and her deeper thoughts that will not be shared on other platforms. So that's patreon.com/differentvoicex. And as always, we greatly, greatly appreciate and thank you for the support. See you in the next one. Take care.